In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
There we go. We're recording, Taylor, on a lovely sunny Sunday. It is going to be it's going to be 2024 by the time this is released. Do you have any New Year's resolutions?
I don't know. I guess I have this really cool book that I used all last year. So it's called the Artist of Life Workbook. I'm gonna hold it up for you. I used it all year. I doodled in it, but it has goals and questions and charts and all these things. And I really liked using it. And I got a new one, so I'm gonna start that up again. I don't know. I'm just gonna keep at it.
Cool. So
New
it's
Year's.
more of a 23 resolution that it worked, so it's going to carry on into 24.
Yeah, I think it did. I think I was excited to write everything down and track some things, and a lot of it is our milestones, which is super cool because I'm super proud of what we did this year. So yeah, it's super fun. So yeah, how about you? Do you have a resolution?
My main thing, it's not really a resolution, it's more just a generic time and resource management thing. I've mostly gone through life with I'll just use brute force and just whale my way into things, and I'm
Yeah.
I'm too old and I need to be a lot more deliberate about what I do with my time, what I
Yeah.
do with resources, all of that. It's just being a lot more mindful about
That's
things.
nice.
Whereas
Yeah.
before I was just I'll just do it because I feel like doing it. And now I'm do I need that? Should I do that? Should I do something
Yeah.
else instead? That's why I was talking to Taylor before we started recording about how productive I've been this week because nobody's around, and I'm usually it'd be oh cool, I'll just call somebody up and go to a bar, and I'm
Right.
my house is falling apart in front of my eyes, and there's a way to waste time and money, and there's a way to actually be deliberate about it, and I'm trying to be a lot
Yeah.
more deliberate about things. So,
I love that.
but I'll also say, Taylor, that I'm pretty proud of us as well. So we didn't quite hit our goal for the year in total downloads, but we got 90% to attainment, and
We did. We got really close.
we got really close. And I will say 90% attainment by any metric set by an organization is
You're
great.
right. No, you're totally right. And we should do stretch goals, all the things. Did you see what I released late last night?
No.
I did a volcano omnibus. It's 5 hours and 19 minutes, all the volcano episodes in a row.
We're Dan Carlin it.
I'm going to submit it.
It.
Dan Carlinian. I'm going to submit it for my dissertation.
For your volcanology degree.
Yeah, I said that in the intro, but it's also still funny to say too. And 20 people have downloaded it, which is exciting. And yeah, I'm going to put some things on Instagram today, so they'll already be up, but our top 10 episodes of the year and everything. But yeah, we have 8,882 downloads. Our goal was 10,000. That's not bad.
That's not bad at all. That's not bad at all.
Yeah.
Really proud of us for what we've done so far this year, and that we kept with it, and we're accountability buddies for each other, so that's always great.
And it's been nice hanging out with you every week.
And it's been nice, yeah. We have a weekly friend check-in, which we didn't have before, so that's great. Cool. Well, I haven't even announced the show. Okay, so we're doing a fail.
Oh God.
We're in our first.
We think we're great.
Coming to the conclusion of our first year anniversary. I think we released our first episode January 16th or 13th or something, I think, of last year. So we're coming up on 1 year, and we're going to keep going because it's fun and we like doing it. So, and hopefully y'all like it as well. And if y'all have any suggestions for 2024, New Year's resolutions you want to share, whatever it is, please don't hesitate to write to us at doomedtofellpod@gmail.com or doomedtofellpod on Instagram or the Facebook socials. So that being said, we'll go ahead and kick things off. I'm Fars, this is Taylor. And Taylor, who goes first today? Me?
I think you, yeah.
I think me. Okay. So why don't I start by, I'm going to do, this one might be a little lengthy, but
Okay,
it's good information, so I think people will be happy about it. So I'm going to go ahead and kick things off, and we'll talk about what I'm going to drink today. It's basically just going to be brine water, because that is going to be the topic of discussion today, which I'm going to give a little bit of hints, and then Taylor's going to take her guess, and she's probably going to nail this one, actually. So,
oh my God, I'm nervous. That's loud.
Yeah.
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, totally. So I wanted to be a little bit more upbeat today with my topic, given that it's the new year. So nobody dies. There is an engineering disaster at
Oh,
fault. Actually, there's several engineering disasters at fault, but weirdly enough, nobody ends up dying.
great.
I actually got today's the inspiration for today's episode because I have this like little cowboy pool, which if you're not in Texas is basically like a stock tank used to feed livestock. And they just fill it with
Mhm.
water and you call it a cowboy pool. It's like a hipster thing. It's kind of cool. It's kind of cute. It's whatever. So I have to treat this thing every now and then. So I gotta like use shock treatment where I like pour a
Yeah.
bunch of chemicals in there, and then I have this like tank. Like a canister full of these little chlorine tablets in the backyard, and I don't open it very much, right? Because you only got to treat it like once a month or once every 6 weeks. And so I opened it and I breathed, which was a horrible mistake. And it just singed the shit out
Oh
of my
no.
nose and my lungs. I was like, oh my
Yeah.
God. Chlorine, like breathing chlorine gas is super, super bad. And so it basically, like, I was basically suffering from that most of yesterday and last night was just like the fact that I inhaled all this chlorine gas. And so
Maybe
it,
you shouldn't be alone. I know you were talking about how being alone has been great for you, but also it sounds like you almost died.
I know, and well, well, the dogs are here, so if anything goes wrong,
Oh,
they'll
okay.
hopefully
Oh,
take
great.
care of me. And so,
You
anyways,
can
that
wait.
no,
Real quick. Can I buy you? We'll talk about getting you a life alert, but keep going.
I probably need one at this stage.
Yeah.
But all that got me thinking about a topic for today's episode because I
Okay.
was already doing a topic on today's episode, and then I realized it was kind of boring. so so I'll literally give you, and also I was like, there's just not enough material here. Like I could stretch it into like maybe
Yeah.
20 minutes, but like
What
it's
was
really
it?
not that much material. So I'll just tell you what I was gonna originally do. I originally did the outline on this thing. It's called it's a lake. So there's a lake in Louisiana called Lake Pignoir. It's a
Hmm.
French name. And basically, the long story short of it is that in the early 1900s, people discovered that if you go super, super deep into this lake, there's a vast reserve of salt rock in there. And so all
Hmm.
these companies showed up, they started mining all this salt rock. It went down like 1,300 feet. It was like a deep, it sounded terrifying. Anyways, so that's what turned out to be like the mining operation underneath this lake. While they were doing this mining operation, there was still a lake on top and everything was fine. People were using it. There was barges there. It would flow out to the ocean, or the Gulf of Mexico and all that good stuff. In the
Hmm.
1980s, Texaco discovered that there's oil deeper underneath that. And so what they
I've seen
did
it.
is they set up some oil rigs on the outside of this mining operation and started drilling downward. But apparently
Hmm.
their calculations were off. What basically ended up happening was they pierced this salt dome
Oh
and
my
turned
God.
this 10-foot deep freshwater lake into a 200 feet deep saltwater lake.
I
Because
hate
because they ended up
lakes.
reversing the flow of the water from out to the ocean, and so
Yeah.
everything was just flooding back inwards, and that's what ended up
Yikes.
happening. So
Yikes. Well, that's terrible, but
yeah, that's
I suppose.
basically it. Crazy enough, nobody died. this thing, this thing took like 3 or 4 days of flooding from the ocean before it was actually
Hmm.
filled up and the pressure neutralized. And then at
Hmm.
that point, all these barges started showing up outside of the. It sounds terrifying.
That sounds terrifying.
But as I was again doing my chlorine shock treatment, hey, wait, there's a better story here than this,
Uh-huh.
and a lot more interesting, a lot more content around it, and it's a lot more prescient to like modern times. So, Taylor, would you have any idea if what this convergence of things is leading me towards?
I feel like I don't know anything about like a big chlorine disaster. Maybe I will after you say it, but I'm thinking that I don't know.
Okay, so it's not chlorine related; it's just chemical
Okay.
related.
Okay. Is it Chernobyl?
No. Okay, I'm just gonna
I
tell
don't
you.
know.
Should I
Just
tell
tell
you?
me. Yeah.
Okay, it is the Salton Sea.
Oh, interesting. I don't know anything about it. I live really close to the Salton Sea.
You live super close to Solon's. I was like, there's no way that Taylor doesn't know the ins and outs of this, like backwards and
No, you're right.
forwards.
I know nothing about it.
Which is interesting
Please,
also
please tell
because
me.
yeah, as you remember, I used to go to La Quinta like
Yeah.
all the time. And the Salton Sea is like right there. And
Yeah.
I never went. And now
Interesting.
now that I'm in Texas, I'm like, ah man, I really what a missed opportunity to like just see
You should
this
go.
thing. Yeah, just to check it out because it seems like a really wild experience, a wild thing that was going on there. But that's what we're going to discuss. Again, nobody directly died as a result of the multiple disasters that took place there, but it took a lot of disasters for it to turn into what it currently is. So
Hmm.
let's get into it. Um, let's start with geography first. So if you drive about 150 miles south of Los Angeles, you will reach the Salton Sea.
How far am I
Uh,
from it? Let's see.
you are crazy close to it,
Yeah.
which is probably going to make you nervous the more I talk about this.
Great.
So I'm sorry about that. And tell Juan I'm sorry. Actually, he's probably going to listen to this. So Juan, I'm sorry.
It's funny.
So on your way there, and again, Taylor and I have been through this area a million times. Taylor lives there currently. On the way there, you're basically going to see some of the most popular and beautiful parts of California that are not ocean related. This is basically the beautiful desert part of California that is incredibly it is a desert scape that rivals New Mexico, Arizona, and all these places. You're going to pass places like Palm Springs, La Quinta, Indio, where Taylor lives, and Joshua Tree, and Coachella Valley, which is obviously famous for the Coachella Festival. All these places are massively populated hubs for people that live either in San Diego or in Los Angeles to vacation. It's like a really convenient 2-3 hour drive to just
Hmm.
be in a totally different universe, essentially.
Yeah, it's an hour and a half from me.
Yeah. Which I'm shocked that it's that. You know what I bet it is? I bet you have to go around the
You do.
national park. That's what it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah, yeah.
as the crow flies, it's probably not that far.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, you definitely have to go around it. I guess you could go through it. Anyway, keep going.
So basically, that's what this is. This is a giant desert landscape. But if you end up making that 150-mile trek, you'll hit 340 square miles in a 43-foot deep body of water that's called the Salton Sea. And unbeknownst to me until like literally earlier yesterday, this is the biggest lake in California.
Wow.
Yeah. So you're probably asking yourself, Fars, how does such a huge lake end up in such a dry and remote area? Isn't that unnatural, Mr.
Cars.
Fars?
How does such a
And
big lake end up in this area?
there you go. Thank you. So
Yeah.
if you ask yourself that question, the answer is yes, you are correct. It is incredibly unnatural, and it is the subject of multiple disasters converging to create something
What?
that is now currently a disaster. So let's get into it. We're going to start with the formation. So in the 1950s, surveyors were basically exploring this part of California. This is the southern part of California, right around Mexico, to find ideal southern railroad routes to go
Hmm.
further north. What they ended up finding was that the soil in this part of the country is super fertile. There's a whole history of like what happened and what rocks eroded in the Cambrian period that like ended up, I'm not going that far.
That's exciting though.
1950s, they
But
find
yeah.
this stuff. The soil is crazy fertile, and they realized that if you just had a water source in this vast desert, you could do a lot with this land. So one of these guys, one of these surveyors, his name was Charles Rockwood, and he decided that he would source water to this area by diverting water from the Colorado River towards it. So I couldn't tell, what we were just talking about. As the crow flies, I can't tell how far Colorado is from where the Salton Sea currently is. It's about a 160-mile drive.
Yeah, I mean the Colorado River is really fighting the Lord's fight because it is keeping all of Nevada and like all of Arizona and like all of Southern California with
I
water,
think
right?
Taylor, I think it's keeping Texas too, because when
Yeah.
you look at like the center of Austin and you have downtown Austin, and you have this body of water there. I'm pretty sure that's the Colorado,
Yeah, it could be. I'm gonna
which
look
is
at a map.
crazy.
Yeah.
Like all of this is from the Rocky Mountains. Like you're right. It is unbelievable what the Colorado River has done for humanity.
Yeah. I hope it doesn't go away.
So basically, what they ended up doing was they ended up digging a canal from the Colorado to connect the Colorado to aquifers and aqueducts that are in this part of what later became known as the Imperial Valley. It wasn't known as that. Now it's known as the
Mhm.
Imperial Valley, but that's what this part is. Also, I was gonna say, like, if anybody actually does know how far the Colorado is to the Salton Sea, like, can you write to us and let us know? Because I dug so many different ways to try and find this because the Colorado apparently has like all these different like turn off points and like it's super craggy in terms of like how it kind of splinters off, and so it's super hard to figure out exactly where it stops. There's no chance they dug 160 miles to this
No,
thing, so like there's got to be
it's like a
some
tributary or
other.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So if anybody knows, please do let us know. So, anyways, they ended up digging this canal in 1901. And then what ended up happening was this unpopulated, unused, but extremely fertile, untouched land had fresh water for the first time ever. And so obviously, this is like that's early 1900s. This area is unpopulated. People are going to do land claims and start staking their claim in this land. And so that's what ended up happening. All these farmers flocked to this part of the country to take advantage of this incredibly fertile land.
Hmm.
Before digging had begun, Rockwood had established a company called the California Development Company to manage the project. And that company was basically selling shares of itself and its product, which was namely this land. So all these people coming to this area and trying to buy this land from this company ended up making the company incredibly valuable.
Hmm.
And obviously, as things are with every company in America, value can never go down. It has to always go up. If it goes down, you're a horrible piece of shit, basically. Not my saying, that's just capitalism. So that comes in handy later. So as this canal was running and everyone was happy and profiting, an unexpected thing happened that kind of screwed everything up. So one thing that they hadn't accounted for when they built this canal was as water moves, underneath it is silt. And silt is
Hmm.
just like sediment, crap like that that's underneath it that ends up moving with the rush of the water. What they hadn't anticipated is that the amount of silt the Colorado would produce through this canal was enough to block the canal. So all of a sudden, you have all these farmers, all this crop, all this industry built up here with,
Hmm.
again, no access to water. That kills the value of your company because all that land is now incredibly devalued.
Hmm.
So they determined that it would take about a year and a ton of money that the company doesn't have to end up to dredge this canal so they could actually get the Colorado flowing again. At this point, this company is basically insolvent. It's almost bankrupt because
Hmm.
the value had gone down so significantly. And so what they ended up doing in 1905 was they asked another company, Southern Pacific, which is a railroad company that was staking out the land to begin with, for a loan so they could basically dredge this thing and get the water flowing again. Part of the
Hmm.
condition of giving this loan was that Southern Pacific would take over ownership of this company.
Hmm.
So Rockwood was not happy about that, but ended up taking the deal anyways. What they did to solve the silt problem was they cut an inlet upstream of the original canal where the silt had built up to get water flowing back in these aquifers again. What ended up happening that wasn't expected was basically a once in a 300-year storm hit the Colorado when they ended up cutting this inlet. So it ended up being a
Great.
pretty small 16-foot wide inlet quickly caved in and was breached by rushing water from the Colorado River. Typically, this wouldn't be a huge problem because what you'd have is what's called a head gate, which is basically like a remote operated dam.
Hmm.
And that had not been approved for construction by the time they built this bypass. So that was not an option.
Hmm.
So the only option they really had was just throw bags of sand and debris or whatever to try and cut the breach off, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I wrote here was the scale of this was kind of hard to imagine. I looked at pictures of this. So there's pictures of this initial canal. There's pictures of this breach, and there's pictures of where the breach ended up happening. It was
Hmm.
basically impossible. So all this farmland was essentially underwater
Right.
as this breach ended up continuing. So it took 2 years of constant flooding for this thing to finally be sealed off. And the way it was sealed off was the Pacific Company built a railroad parallel to where the breach happened and would
Uh-huh.
line up railroad cars day and night for 2 years and just dump granite or not granite, but like rocks and things like that into this breach until it finally closed up. I didn't write the number
What?
down, yeah, I didn't write the number down, but it was something like the breach ended up becoming 2,600 feet, like half a mile long. So this tiny
Wow.
16-foot thing ended up because it would keep flooding. So after
Hmm.
2 years, they finally got this thing sealed. So it's 1907. So now this body, you now have this huge fresh water body of water completely cut off from the Colorado. but the surrounding area is still full of incredibly fertile soil. So farming
Hmm.
again begins on the outskirts, while at the same time, a burgeoning city starts sprouting up around the lake for basically vacation and relaxation and stuff like that.
Hmm.
It basically was then what Palm Springs or La Quinta or Indio are now. So, like again,
Yeah, I feel like I've
if
seen like ads for it, right? Or like 50s
yeah,
style, like come relax for the Salton Sea, you know,
yeah, they
right?
called it the Desert Riviera or the Salton Riviera.
Hmm.
It was propped up at the time as basically the next big thing. So all these
Hmm.
people would buy property here, businesses would sprout around this place. A lot of celebrities were there. There was a huge deal made, and a lot of the content I read about this around how Frank Sinatra always went there, and like Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball would constantly. It was one
Oh,
of those
totally. They
spots.
loved it down here. Yeah.
Yeah, it is again. It's just like Indio, Palm Springs, La Quinta right now. So like anybody who's well off in LA also has like a desert place in these spots, and they just vacation back and forth. That's the exact same
Yeah.
concept here. One thing I wrote here, Taylor, and like I totally would understand if you don't get this. Also, you probably won't get it because you live there, and also because you're from Nevada. So actually, it's kind of shitting on everything. So let me, let me bring it up real quick.
Cool. I'm
Let me bring
ready.
it. There's there's something I was dwelling about, and I've always felt this way. Again, I've been this area a million times. I've always felt this way. That there's something off about how uninhabitable this part of the country actually is. So you go through like La Quinta and you
Uh-huh.
see how like there's these multi-million dollar estates with these amazing lawns. You have some of the best golfing in the country
Hmm.
in this part of the world, and all of it just seems like, and also again like air conditioning 24/7 because as you know, Taylor, in the summertime it's like almost it's impossible to be inside without air conditioning. It's
Yeah.
just all is like so over the top frivolous
I
to
mean, I
me.
definitely feel that way about Palm Springs. Like, there's no reason for Palm Springs to be green at all. They have like
Yeah.
one, you know what I mean? And like they're like 10, 15 degrees hotter than we are, but so much greener. And you're like, how do you have grass here? Like you have to just be pumping unbelievable amounts of water into this.
So this is a strange celebrity shout out, but I recently like came across somehow Ray Romano came into my periphery. I don't know how. I think it was like a podcast I listened to and somebody called it. I don't know, but there was I looked up how he has just basically resettled from wherever he was to La Quinta, the city I was just referencing, and he ended
Uh-huh.
up building this palatial house in La Quinta, and it was documented and reported on by Architectural Digest. So there's tons of beautiful pictures of this house. It is amazing, as it probably should be, since he's like a gazillionaire.
Yeah.
And I have nothing against Ray Romano. I think like he's allowed to live. We are okay with Ray Romano. But I will say, when you look at this house and you look at like where it is, and you're like, this thing is like half built out of cement or
Yeah.
concrete, which requires a shitload of water. It is lush grass. It is. You can see in the living room that there's a beautiful golf course next to it, and it's just like all this is in a desert that has no water. It has,
I know.
like,
I
it's
mean,
just
that's
like
like literally all of Las Vegas. Oh my God. You know, like all of those things for sure.
like I not to sound like an old timey guy, but like eventually the chickens are gonna come home to roost.
Yeah.
Like, you can't keep doing that and it not pay a price. And really, the Salton Sea is a really good example of that. Like that just happens to be like ground zero for the kind of price that societies and communities pay when things like
Hmm.
this end up happening. And
Totally.
realistically, that is exactly what the Salton Sea was. It was just like an India or whatever. It was just built up luxury over the top, like yeah, it's like Vail for people in Colorado. Like it's where you go basically.
Yeah.
And this is like the 19 that was really happening mostly in the 40s after the war through like the 70s or so is when it was really popping. So let's pivot real quick to the fun topic of ecology. So, after the lake was formed, the California Fish and Wildlife Commission looked at other bodies of water with similar ecology, and they settled on the Sea of Cortez as being pretty similar to the Salton Sea. So they could figure out like how do we end up actually building it out more essentially.
Hmm.
And so they go to the Sea of Cortez, and they basically
Where's that?
are. It's south of the Salton Sea. It's right above
Oh,
the Gulf of Mexico and Mexico.
okay.
Um, and they go out there and say basically catch any fish you could get, anything you can capture, catch it. Let's dump it in this lake and see what happens. And that's what they end up doing.
Love
So over time, they ended up catching and releasing about 200 species of aquatic animals, including lobsters, shrimp, tilapia, carp, catfish, bass. There's a ton of other stuff on here that like I've never heard of, so I'm not even going to name it. But it was chocked full of fish. At its height, it was estimated that about 100 million fish populated the lake. So that made it incredibly popular with fishermen. So people would be recreationally fishing, but also there was another industry added to it, which was fishing. And with all that comes migratory birds. So again, staying on with the ecology aspect of the Salton Sea, Taylor, this is incredible. Like I was researching the migratory pattern of birds, and I was like, we need to change the topic of this podcast to just birds. Like,
I love birds. I would totally do a bird podcast with you because I would love to talk about them. We can go to bird shows at zoos across the country and rate them because fucking love a bird
it's
show.
unbelievable. So there's a thing called the Pacific Flyway, which is a north-south route from California or Canada all the way down to South America, and it's broken down to like four main corridors. Obviously, the one that's most relevant to this story is the one that goes from California up through Oregon and
Hmm.
Washington. Um, and basically, all these birds that are doing this huge migration, some going as far as 16,000 miles, need to stop occasionally and like get food and water and do all that stuff. And the Salton Sea ended up becoming an incredibly useful part of the migratory pattern of all these birds. Taylor, this part's crazy. So birds have a thing called unihemispheric slow wave sleep. It's USWS for short because I'm never gonna say that word again because I took all my brain power just to fucking read that right now. Basically, what it means is that birds are able to go into full on sleep with half their brains resting, and the other half focus on staying in flight and navigating in the right direction.
Cool.
Isn't that crazy?
That is so cool. I don't know what.
That
That's
is
crazy.
unbelievable.
Can I tell you a quick story about birds?
Yeah.
This I don't have the details of this, but I do know that at one point in Europe, they were trying to figure out where the birds went in the winter, and they didn't know, and there's no way to track them because it was like before technology. And one bird came back with an African arrow inside of it. It was
That's
still
so
alive,
wild.
and then they were like, "Holy shit, this bird's been to Africa."
So crazy.
Yeah,
So crazy. Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because you look at old pictures of the Salton Sea and you just see like it could be Africa, it could be the savannah, it could be
yeah.
any it was so lush, it was so green. I mean, it made me think a lot of like how big of a deal water is. Like when water's there,
Oh, we're
like
gonna die.
everything revolves around that water,
Yeah,
and that's what ended
yeah.
up happening in this area as well. So you're probably wondering where's this going, Fars? There's no doom to fail here. Is that what you're asking yourself? Where's this going, Fars?
No, I just assume that everything is lovely and it's still a beautiful oasis. So that's the end of our show. Thank you for listening.
Fars is here to say it's doomed to fail. So
Boo.
we had one massive disaster. These guys were again starting this app project just to get irrigation. It ended
Mhm.
up flooding the entire valley, which is now called the Imperial Valley. So what could go wrong? Because now you have this amazing body of water, you have all this ecology, you have all this industry popping up, you have people shelling out their entire life savings buying lakeside housing and all that stuff. So what could go wrong is that in the 1970s, the Army Corps of Engineers started recording the salinity levels and toxins in the water. And Taylor, I was thinking to myself, there is no chance everyone did not see this coming. I mean, it sounds like it was a surprise to people,
Right.
but how could
There
it
was
have been a
someone who knew.
surprise?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's obviously a document hidden somewhere
Yeah.
that all these companies that
Always.
were selling property and doing whatever just hid from everyone. I actually knew somebody whose grandfather bought a plot of land on the Salton Sea, and they still actually technically own it, but it's like completely, absolutely worthless. I looked on Zillow, and there's actually two properties for sale that are on the
Oh,
Salton Sea. What's amazing is one is being sold for $11 million. It's 120 acres on the Salton Sea. It's like, who's this for? Like, the only thing I could think of was eventually for like lithium mining, it could be useful, but like, man, 11 million, you're asking a lot. So,
Yeah.
anyways, the disaster part of what ends up happening in the Salton Sea is entirely dependent on the kind of body of water the Salton Sea actually is, which is why I said
Hmm.
somebody had to know. The body of water itself is called a endorheic basic. It is called an
Per-
endorheic basic. And
That's
since all of us know
perfect.
what that is, let's move on. Basically, what this
That's fine.
essentially means is that it is a body of water. It is a catch basin for water and for whatever ends up in it with no outflow. So there is no connection to any tributaries, rivers, lakes, oceans, or anything like that. For the record, the Great Salt Lake in Utah, in Salt Lake City, that is also
Uh-huh.
one of these lake types. That's what it is.
Hmm.
So the surrounding areas of the Salton Sea continued farming after the flood of 1905, and the lake was the lowest part in the area, obviously. So whatever farming runoff they had ran down into the lake. Obviously, that's bad, but water salinity seems to be the biggest issue as of today. So right now, the Salton Sea is twice as salty as the Pacific Ocean, and that's all
Whoa.
because it's a closed system. Because
Right.
nothing goes in, water just goes out. It evaporates. So that's obviously not good for freshwater fish, which is what this thing was chock full of. The Army Corps of Engineers would take measurements, and they started noting the salinity levels and the toxic levels of the fish. And they basically started by saying anybody who's pregnant like should not be touching this fish, and if you're not pregnant, then you should have very little of it on like a weekly or monthly basis. And
Hmm.
so, just like that, that killed the fishing industry. They were like, well, what's the
Yeah.
point? Why am I even doing this? What am I going to put a disclaimer on my fish when I sell it in the market?
Potentially poison. Yeah.
So, as time went on, locals and tourists would start experiencing mass waves of die offs of fish and marine life because the salt levels were getting so high they couldn't survive.
Right.
And they would just wash ashore like millions of fish that would just stink the entire place to high hell.
Ew.
And obviously, that wasn't good for tourism. That wasn't good for living there or any of that stuff. So out goes the
No.
tourism essentially. Again, people had bought homes here. Like this was a huge, not just like an environmental issue. It was a huge economic issue.
Yeah.
Because as dead fish are floating up, as the salinity level is getting to the point where you physically shouldn't be touching the water yourself, given that it's just going to slough your skin off, and
Ew.
the fact that all this water is basically receding anyways from through evaporation, the city itself and like the surrounding communities became ghost towns. And you look at
Yeah.
pictures of it now. Look at Bombay Beach, for example. There's actually a new sign up there. Somebody is turning into like an art installation essentially. But that area was an incredibly populous, thriving part of the city. Like that was kind of like the central hub that you would go to. It looked like a Malibu. Like it looked like that
Hmm.
kind of an atmosphere. So obviously the economic part of this and the lost money and all that stuff is a huge issue that ended up happening, as well as all these industries basically going into complete decline. The other part was that as the lake bed is exposed, the lake bed contains all this agricultural runoff, it contains all this salt, and that is an issue for the people in the surrounding areas. So there is a roughly 3 to 4x higher amount of children having asthma issues in this part of the country than any other part of the
Ugh.
country.
Whoa.
And all this is just from dust storms kicking up all this crap from the ground, from the lake bed, and just kicking it up into the atmosphere. It's not even just that. It's not like I mean, there's a host of other things that are going on that are causing health issues. Asthma is the biggest one that's been reported because it also seems to be like asthma is a good indicator of like other things that could be going on with that health system, and
Hmm.
so that's what's being reported on the most. So in terms of what to do about this, so this thing is going to keep going down until completely evaporates, leaving behind it a never-ending future dust storm that's going to keep kicking up this stuff and harming people and growing in size based on how much the lake goes down. Again, this is the largest body of water in California.
Oh
So
my God. I
there's
am a little worried. Thank you.
there you go. I knew. Sorry, I knew that was coming. Apologies if you didn't want. So obviously there is a super super simple solution to this. Do you know what it is?
Drain it?
Well, that would definitely exacerbate the massive dust storm that's going to kick up over your house, but
Fill it with more water.
fill it with more water. The obvious solution is to divert fresh water to it. The problem is nobody wants to do that who can actually has the power to do that because right now, in as long as I lived in Los Angeles, as long as Los Angeles is going to exist, it is in a perpetual drought. Like it
Yeah.
is always drought season in Los Angeles, and it's becoming more and more obvious that's the case also in places like San Diego. So all excess water is being diverted into those two main hubs. The reason is basically that there isn't really anybody that cares about this part of the country, like the Salton Sea
Hmm.
area. Yes, Indio, all that stuff, all those are really rich, lucrative spots. And so there's a tax base there people care about. But I just learned that this district, the Imperial Valley area, it is actually splitting a representative with San Diego. So
Mm,
that's how wide this area stretches. And
yeah.
so obviously they're just not going to get prioritized. And frankly, the tax base in San Diego and Los Angeles is a lot more important to the state than it is there.
Right. There's probably even not that many people there, and they're not doing well.
No, in total, I think there's about still 340 people who are outliers. I think that was the last 2020 census, so it's probably gone down. Every year it's gone down. So this
Yeah.
this place went from 500,000 visitors a year to now there's 340 something people living there. By the way, back then when it was measured at 500,000 people per year, that was the same amount of people that were visiting Yosemite.
Oh, good. Good, good, good.
Yeah, so it was huge. It was a big, big deal at that time.
Huh.
So the other solution that remaining residents are basically considering is going to Mexico. So their idea was let's go ask permission from the government of Mexico to basically dig a ditch from the Sea of Cortez to funnel water. Essentially, the Sea of Cortez is higher in elevation than the Salton Sea is, and so all they would need is a ditch to funnel water that way. And
Uh-huh.
so that's the other idea that's being floated around that has been pending for like 4 or 5 years, I think. Long story short is that with a project this size of magnitude, there is so much bureaucracy involved in it. You have to get approval from the government of Mexico, the US government, the government of California, every single one of
Yeah.
those individual agencies, all the wildlife commissions, all the environmental agencies, the engineering commissions, the Army Corps of Engineers. Like it is thousands of different organizations that have to
Wait,
come together to give
that's
you a
never
rubber
gonna
stamp
happen.
approval. It is never going to happen. Like they're
No.
that like it'll be faster. They just go open their faucet and just try and fill it up themselves. So that's kind of where things currently stand. It is eventually obviously going to dry out. Like there's nothing that's going to help it. And then by all estimates, the environmental impact once it dries out to the health and well-being and all the other stuff that comes with it, once this thing dries out and kicks up 340 square miles of toxins, agricultural runoff, and salt, is somewhere in the range of 70 to 100 billion dollars, what's going to end up ultimately costing I don't know who, but it's going to cost somebody, either the state of California or the federal government or one of those super funds. I don't know, but that's kind of where the state of things is right now.
Wow. I have a question. I don't know if you know the answer. I'm sure that, like, why is it so hard to take salt out of water? Because there
I
is so much
don't
water.
know.
Like, why isn't desalinization the answer?
I don't know. I do know that 99% Invisible or The Daily or one of those podcasts, they did an episode of this when I was still living in Los Angeles because there was so many wildfires happening. I
Uh-huh.
don't know if I ever got an answer to that, like why it's so hard to do.
Yeah. Because it feels like that's the answer. Because
It
there's so much fucking
does.
water. But it must be impossible.
Or, maybe it's not that they're maybe the expense has to do with transference. So, like, if you think about it, if you're on the coast where desalinization makes sense, then you are already prioritized the tax base to get water.
Right. So you don't have to.
So you don't have to. You really need it for the non-represented class. And like they generally don't
Yep.
have.
That totally
But
checks out.
because then you have to then take the water and then transfer it to them, which is also a massive engineering problem because you have to cut through mountains and whatever else.
I know. Actually, water is definitely our through line of our two episodes today. I'm going to talk a little bit about how hard it is to move water.
Good. Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
discuss it then. But that's my story. Again, you have engineering disaster on top of environmental disaster, and yeah, not
Yeah, it sounds
good.
bad.
Yeah, super regret never visiting it when I was there.
I feel but like, should you visit it?
I mean, if it's not windy, it's probably not a big problem. But it's kind of always windy there, isn't it? Like I remember like so many dust storms driving through there.
Yeah, I mean, like Palm Springs is so windy. Obviously, they have all those like wind energy things,
Yeah, yeah.
and yeah, it's crazy windy there.
You know, yeah, I guess I was just there even like this, or I guess last year. I went to Palm Springs again, but yeah, super
Wow.
interesting, super fun. Hopefully y'all enjoyed that. Taylor, do we have anything we want to shout out?
I have a couple of things of mail. One is our friend Nadine wrote in, and she said that there are tulips that you can that come back every year in case you wanted them.
Fun.
I know that we had talked about like at the end of the tulip episode, you're like, I'm gonna go to Home Depot and get some plants. And I don't know if you ever did, but
I
people
did
were.
get plants, but they're not tulips.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, so if you ever wanted to, there are some that come back. You could probably grow them there, I feel like. And then also our friend Beth bought some merch. She bought a shirt and mug. Isn't that
Wedding
nice?
Beth?
Yeah,
Beth,
I know. Thank you so much, Beth.
thanks.
That's so nice.
That's so nice.
I know. Yeah.
Aw.
So thank you. Very
Jay's gonna be
sweet.
so excited when he gets a picture with my face on it.
Oh my God, I'm so excited for Jay to wear that all the time. I'm sure the t-shirt's for Jay and I can't wait.
I love it. I love it. Cool.
Yeah, cool. That's what I got. Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you again for listening this in 2023. Please find us on all the socials at Doomed to Fail Pod. And if you have any suggestions or questions, we are available at doomedtofailpod@gmail.com.
Yeah, we are constantly looking to iterate. So like, if you have any like, as far as your stories suck, just tell us whatever. Like, whatever the suggestion is, we want to put out content that people are actually interested in and like. So, yeah, don't be
Keep us
shy.
posted.
Keep us
Cool.
posted. Sweet. Thanks all.
Thanks, Fires.
Bye, Taylor.
Bye.